2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 28th, 2022 meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission. This virtual meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and planning commissioners while allowing for public participation. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcasted on Comcast Channel 27 and the city's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/BrisbaneCA. The agenda materials may be viewed online at www.brisbaneca.org/meetings. All written comments submitted before 2 p.m. of the day of the meeting have already been provided to the commission and available for public inspection at the front lobby in City Hall and online at www.brisbaneca.org/meetings. Any writings received after the agenda has been posted, but after 2 p.m. of the day of the meeting will be available online at the start of the meeting at www.brisbaneca.org/meetings, at which time the materials will be distributed to the commission. For those who did not provide written comments, a call-in number was provided on the agenda, which can be viewed online at www.brisbaneca.org/meetings. The phone number and instructions will also be provided during the meeting. Participants in the Zoom webinar may make their comments through Zoom. Please note that Zoom participants will only be to address the commission verbally. I will announce time limits for public comments during the particular item. Staff, may we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Funka?
Here.
Commissioner Gooding?
Here.
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Saison?
Here.
The record show Commissioner Lau is absent.
Adoption of the agenda. Can we please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Staff, may we please have a voice vote?
Commissioner Funka?
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Saison?
Aye.
Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there any member of the public or any commissioners that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Zoom participants who want to pull an item from the consent calendar please raise your hand, or by pressing *9 on the phone if you have called in. Staff will start a timer for 30 minutes for members of the public to ask to pull an item.
Through the chair, that'll be 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Did I say 30 minutes? Oh, I'm sorry.
Meetings are long enough as is, Chairman.
Please no.
Do any of the commissioners want to remove an item from the consent calendar?
No.
5 more seconds. All right, time has elapsed and no one has raised their hand.
Thank you. Can I please have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
I'll second.
Can we please have staff? Can we please have a voice vote?
Commissioner Funka?
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Saison?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to oral communications. Oral comments on items not on the agenda can be called in by calling the teleconference number in the next 1 minute or made by participants in the Zoom webinar. Staff is currently displaying the call-in number on the screen, and any Zoom meeting participants should raise their hand to indicate to staff that they would like to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Callers must press *9 or to raise their hands. I have not received any written communications, and I don't know if staff has any comments on whether we have any additional written communications.
No additional written communications.
Through the chair, there was a memo from staff on the adoption of the grading ordinance as a written communication that was distributed with your packet.
Okay.
10-second warning. Okay, 1 minute has passed and no one raised their hand.
Okay. Looking at our agenda, there's no old business and there is no new business. So at this time, I would ask that we do the workshop, which is titled 2023-2031 Housing Element Update, Preview of Goals, Policies, and Programs of the Draft 2023-2031 Housing Element.
Absolutely. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So tonight we are having a workshop to give kind of a sneak peek to the draft housing element for the 2023 to 2031 planning period. This is a culmination. You thought you were done with workshops on this. We squeeze one more in before we have the draft actually published, which we hope will be very soon. So tonight the format will be a little bit different. We have two facilitators here, Debbie Schechter and Saini. Saini, I apologize. When I ask you to state your name when we're introduced, who are going to guide through our discussion. They're here to kind of be, third party. They're expert facilitators. I'll let them give a brief introduction before we dive in. And basically tonight, so we'll give a really brief introduction again to what the housing element is, what we are doing, and then the primary discussion will be for several new policies and programs that you will see in the draft element that we think warrant some consideration and we wanted to kind of air out prior to the publication. We'll also have some interactive elements for the public, some polling, and use of the Q&A box. So if you do have questions at any time during the presentation, you can enter them into the Q&A box, and if you don't know how to use that, we'll go over that in another slide. So that's our agenda for tonight. I'll turn it over now to Debbie Schechter to introduce herself and Saini and go over the group agreements for the discussion.
Thanks, Julia, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Welcome, commissioners and members of the public. I just want to say a little bit about our role. So we are here as neutral facilitators to help make sure that you all can have a productive conversation around the proposed policies and programs for the housing element. I know that the planning staff has been doing some outreach and we're hoping for more participation from the public tonight. So maybe we'll get that a little later on. But our role is to guide the process of the meeting so that the commissioners and the public can engage in the content, can share their ideas and input, and so that staff and the commission doesn't have to manage that discussion. That's what we're here to do today. And I also just wanted to point out that The services that we're providing are funded by ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. So I have a contract with them to provide community engagement support around housing elements. And so they're providing this service for the city. And my co-facilitator who's going to take notes today is Saini Mateolona. I'm going to say hi, Saini.
Hello, glad to be here.
Thank
And
you.
majority of the time, I'm sorry, Dave, just majority of the time, my camera will be off since I'll be taking notes in the background.
Thanks, Saini. So this list of group agreements is something that we like to use to make sure that we have productive meetings and that folks can share their ideas in a safe and respectful place. So our group agreements today are to listen for understanding. So a lot of times we're just waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can speak, but we encourage folks to listen for understanding, both to the presentation and to what you hear from other folks providing input today. To speak respectfully, we know that should not be an issue today. Let everyone participate and be concise, be conscious of the time that we have. We ask that you be solution oriented. So I know that the city is really looking to solutions to meet its housing goals. So we ask folks to be solution oriented and then to let the facilitator guide the process of the meeting. So are folks okay with these group agreements today? I see some thumbs ups. Yep. All right, great. Thanks, Julia. Back to you.
All right, let me unmute myself here. Okay, so I'm not sure about launching this quite yet. I'll let Jeremiah know if this is something we need to do. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna launch a poll just to see who is here in our attendees. Launch. Okay, so here's an attempt to try to get to know who's in our audience. So there's a couple questions here asking about your connection to Brisbane, if you wouldn't mind sharing. And I'll leave it up for 30 seconds or so. And while we're waiting, again, we will launch a polling feature throughout the discussions tonight if we end up having some more public attendance, which we're hoping for, but cannot guarantee. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end that. Okay. Okay, well, we do have an audience, but they did not want to share their connection to Brisbane, which is totally okay. And then just in terms of participation, so again, the polling and then the Q&A box is open. Okay, I'm going to hand it over now to Ken to give us our little quick intro to the housing element.
Great. Thank you, Julia. So I'll just talk for a few minutes, a bit on the background, also the current status of the housing element, the job of the goals, policies, and programs, and then I'll touch on why we propose to modify the goals since our last workshop earlier this year. And I'll turn it back to Julia and our facilitators to discuss some key policies and programs. So first on the background, a quick review. The housing element is a state mandated element of a jurisdiction's general plan. The general plan serves as the local government's blueprint for meeting its long-term vision for the future, and it includes 7 mandatory elements. The housing element is required by the state to be updated on 8-year cycles. Our current cycle covers the period from 2015 up through this year, and then what we're talking about tonight, of course, is for 2023 through 2031. There are a number of statutory requirements, including probably the most well-known one of meeting the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or the RHNA. So the housing element evaluates existing and projected community housing needs based on demographic data and projections, and provides a housing plan for the future. And if we can go to the next slide. We are in the midst of the update for the 2023-2031 housing element cycle and had a countywide engagement set of events last fall, followed by a community workshop series with the Planning Commission, and that went from December through March. Those covered various topics such as demographics and arena and others. We also had a couple online surveys related to fair housing and also site selection for potential housing. And we presented results in those workshops, and those results were also going to be presented within the housing element itself. Since then, staff has been working on preparing the housing element for public review, and we anticipate its release in early August, probably just about a week away. And next slide. The heart of the housing element is its goals, policies, and programs. They distill the analysis of our housing needs, the demographics, fair housing considerations, constraints, and zoning capacity into a number of actions to be taken by the city. Essentially, it's a housing plan going forward for the next 8 years. In brief, goals are the guiding principles or aspirations, or outcomes that the city wants to achieve. An example goal might be facilitate and support the production of housing at all income levels. Policies bore down a little deeper under the goals and are specific statements that guide decision-making or a commitment to a particular course of action. And programs are specific actions then that implement the policies and help achieve those overarching goals. Often these have specific targets or dates tied to them. And so just a generalized example of a program under a goal, that goal would be zoning to meet the RHNA by a certain date. Another might be maintaining existing zoning for housing developments, just a couple examples there. And next slide. As an overarching objective within this update is to make the housing plan more streamlined and straightforward, resulting in a more effective plan that is easier to understand and implement. At the Commission's Housing Element Workshop on March 10th, staff presented recommended draft goals and policies for the Commission's review and feedback. Staff had not yet prepared the associated implementing programs for the Commission's review. Since that workshop, staff has proposed additional changes to the draft goals to simplify the organization of the plan. There's generally the same overarching intent as the current housing element goals, but organized specifically around what might be termed the 3 Ps of housing. That's production, preservation of housing, and protection from displacement. They also address new state law regarding affirmatively furthering fair housing, as well as public awareness and education, conservation and GHG or greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and then finally avoiding unreasonable government constraints. So those are essentially form the principles under which the policies and programs are then organized. So with that, I'll turn it back to Julia to talk about the proposed new modified policies and programs.
Okay, thanks, Ken. All right, let's kick it off. So there was an attachment to your memo in the packet that had all of the draft policies and programs, and we highlighted several that we are going to dive into tonight. These seem to be programs that probably, like I said, warrant some careful consideration, whether it's a new policy direction or something that is, pretty far reaching in terms of its community impact potential. We wanted to highlight those tonight. So let's start the first program that was highlighted. This is a new program that I've put the exact wording on the screen here. But basically, it's a program committing to study in detail at a future date whether there may be opportunities to reduce the minimum lot sizes in residential zoning districts. This would increase the availability of developable land while also ensuring that whatever new housing is developed on that land is smaller in terms of size, because it would be, accompanying or built upon a smaller lot size. And then just a little bit of background, the current lot size in our R1, R2, and R3 districts, which are the primary residential districts in central Brisbane, is 5,000 square feet. But you'll see, and I've thrown up on the screen here, a little shot of a block of Mendocino in between Visitation and San Bruno, where you can kind of see those purple lines that are indicating property size. There's a lot of 2,500 square foot lots that are 25 wide next to 5,000 square foot lots, next to 3,700 square foot lots. This is as a result of our original subdivision map, which was recorded in 1908, that the original lots were 25 by 100. And over the years, the city increased the minimum lot size, meaning if you want to build on a lot, it has to be at least this size, from 2,500, those original lots, to 5,000. And there's a lot of obviously very good reasons behind why that change happened. But just to illustrate that our existing development pattern has a lot of smaller lots already. So it would be a move to kind of go back to allowing smaller lot sizes in an attempt to allow for more infill development. So I'll hand it over now to Debbie to guide our discussion of this program.
Thanks, Julia. So just to lay out kind of the format of how we're going to do this. So Julia's going to walk through each program or policy, and then we're going to pause for discussion, first from the commissioners and then from members of the public. And for each program or policy, we have 1 or 2 questions that we'd like to focus the discussion on. Of course, you're free to say whatever you like, but I think staff identified that this is the sort of input that would be most helpful to them in terms of getting input on these programs. So the first question on this program about allowing lower minimum lot sizes is, we just want to know, what is your reaction to this program and why? So if you like it, if you think it's a good idea, why? If you think it's a bad idea, why? So again, we'll start with commissioners, and then we'll move on if members of the public have comments or questions. So you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak up.
Well, alphabetically, I guess I usually go first, at least in roll call. So
Okay.
my first reaction is that I like it. I'm all for increased density and infill instead of consuming more land with bigger lots. So in general, I am for. I think smaller structures are good. It's also my personal aesthetic. I kind of like smaller houses. So my first reaction is positive to this, and if I can maybe channel reactions that I've heard from other people, I'm aware of some lots in our neighborhood where a lot that was originally of a certain size, which I assume was like 5,000, was subdivided, and the neighbor's reaction to that was negative. It's like, how can they possibly fit 2 houses on that lot? And I don't know quite. I assume, staff, that any lot on which a house is being built right now has to conform to this 5,000 square foot rule?
In the R1, R2, and R3 districts, that's the minimum size for single family homes. So we're really, and I should have clarified, sorry, this really does impact single family home development the most. In the R2 and R3 district, there's slightly minimum, well, there's still a minimum lot size. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. So let me step back. This would only impact the R1, R2, and R3 districts. There are different sizes with the 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. Other districts have other minimum lot sizes, like 7,500 square feet in the SCR01.
Yeah.
So but we do have provisions to recognize lots that are not 5,000 square feet. There's a lot line adjustment. There's other like methods to recognize smaller lots and still allow them to be developed. 2,500 square foot lots, for example, can be developed with a single family home. If, that is the situation. So I don't know what you were thinking of in your neighborhood, what you were noticing. I don't know if it was like maybe an ADU or.
No, it wasn't. It's actually a house, and I won't go into details, but I think it's probably a situation where people were used to seeing one single family home on a lot, and then it changed hands and the lot was subdivided. And I think maybe just historically, they were just shocked, like, oh, the driveways are too close or something. But I think that, nevertheless, my reaction in general is positive. I think we should use our land efficiently. And I always like it when I go anywhere, really. And I'm impressed with the high density that the city is planning for and approving. It can be very attractive if it's done right. So anyway, that's me.
And do you have any thoughts on the second question is in what areas of the city could this approach make sense? Any immediate thoughts on that?
Well, maybe, I guess in general, my first reaction would be lower down on the hill, because it might even be harder on, where the lots are steeper and the streets are narrower and wind more. But maybe that could also be on a case by case basis as well.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Other reactions from commissioners?
And so in the alphabet, I'll go next. I think I agree with the rule in general, which is that we're reaching a point where to be able to increase housing, we simply have to cluster a little more closely together. And so therefore, to the extent that we can utilize our lots, in a sensible manner, it does make sense to increase the density to some extent so that we can create good housing. So I do agree with that.
Thank you. And do you have any thoughts on which areas?
No, I think, we have such an unusual, conglomeration of lot sizes and shapes that I think, to Rule's point, we do have to go on a case-by-case basis without trying to create a template that works for the whole city. I don't think that may not be feasible or may not be the wisest way to go.
Thank you. If you'd like to go alphabetically, we can do that, but there's no constraints here.
Sounds good. I'll go next then. So I think the general idea is good. However, I think that one of the concerns that most people in the community have and seem to have had over the past however many years we've been doing this, whenever we talk about increasing density, is that there is absolutely no parking in Brisbane. And so in subdividing lots into halves, or subdividing them into 3 and increasing density, all sounds like a great idea, with the caveat of how are we going to address the parking issue?
Yes. Thank you. So far we're hearing kind of general support, but yeah, for sure the concern about parking.
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Commissioner Patel said about the parking issue. And I think some of it also depends upon, the character of the neighborhood. For example, I live on the ridge, and I think, I can't speak for all my neighbors, but I think we appreciate the space and the availability of parking on this side of the city. So I think, state law ties our hands in terms of what residents want to do in terms of splitting their lots and whatnot. But I think, if we want to promote that further, I think we really have to dive into the parking, dive into more making public transportation more accessible, things like that, so I think really input from the residents as to, again, the character of the of their community, what they want, because I think people moved here for certain reasons. They kind of liked the feel of the neighborhood, and this would kind of, I think, change that quite a bit. So something we should take into consideration.
Thank you. So in addition to parking, sort of considering the character of the neighborhood. I wonder if staff has any thoughts on the parking issue. I know that's one of the programs that we'll talk about later has to do with parking, but anything you want to say, Julia or Ken, before we move on?
I'll just echo what Chair Patel said, is that's definitely parking. The lack of parking in Brisbane is something we have tackled as a community for quite some time. And definitely this program, I would anticipate parking be a huge component of a future study session if we were to discuss this in more detail.
Thank you. I think we've heard from all the commissioners. And so we want to turn to the members of the public and see if we have a few members of the public to see if you all have any reaction to this program. And we put up a poll, and then you can respond to that. And then if you want to share a verbal comment, I think we have a bit of time for that too. Is that right, Julia?
Yes, that's fine. Obviously, I've launched that poll. If people want to participate, they can. I do see 2 raised hands. Okay, we have Barbara Ebel with the raised hand. Barbara, I'll allow you to talk.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I'm totally down with dividing lots. My concern is just that these smaller units on these subdivided lots be held to the same standards as every other lot, that they have the same setback, the same FAR, the same parking requirements. I know that's going to make some of them difficult to build, and some of those houses will end up being quite small. But I think we really have a shortage of small homes in Brisbane, so I think that might actually work to our advantage in making some, entry-level starter homes. So my concern is just that when people come in and they're like, oh, well, I have to have this so that, it's the only way my life works, and I otherwise I can't have a family, I have sympathy for those people, but I mostly care about, and I'm sorry for them, but I want a level playing field for everybody. And I think that's what gets us the best community, is when we all kind of play by the same rules together. And so in short, I'm positive on it, but I want to see everybody kind of play by the same rules. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that comment. We also have, it looks like Kenneth Doe would like to share. Go ahead.
Are we speaking on the housing element?
Right now, we're talking specifically about this program, about allowing minimum lot sizes.
Okay.
If you want to speak on the housing element in general, I think, do we want to take those comments now, Julia, or wait?
Yeah, Kenneth.
Okay. Go ahead.
Share what you'd like, and we'll.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Kenneth Doe. I'm field representative for North Kyle Carpenters Union Local 217, representing 36,000 members in Northern California. Housing element is great because it provides housing for all income level and benefits the people that want to live and work in Brisbane. However, before granting this approval, there needs to be some labor standards for the housing element. a commitment to apprenticeship program to guarantee we have an experienced workforce to complete high-quality project in a safe and timely manner, a livable wage with medical and retirement benefits that will allow workers and their families to live in the community they work in. This also means those wages will be reinvested back into the local community as they spend their earnings, and their tax dollars will help fund local schools and government. Projects that invest in apprenticeship, prevailing wage, and healthcare are the best deals for workers and their community. We believe the housing element with the pre-qualification language will help ease the housing burden we all face. I would very much love to have a real valuable meeting with each and every one of you to answer questions you might have about labor violation and what labor standard might look like. For all these reasons, the Carpenter urges the City of Brisbane to adapt these labor standards as a requirement for the housing element. Before I go, let me leave you with this question. How can you, as a city, better support and guard the working class men and women of beautiful Brisbane? Thank you.
Thanks, Kenneth.
Thanks, Kenneth.
And yeah, just to clarify tonight, we're not, it's not a public hearing on the housing element, but I think there actually is a policy. Obviously, you're asking for the city to consider policies related to labor and wages. So that point is, I still think, appropriate for us to talk about tonight in our workshop when we're talking about policies and programs. We don't have draft programs that address that right now. So we'll take that comment and definitely, forward that on to the commission for their public hearings and city council. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And again, for the folks that are here and participated, we're seeing some support for it. But granted, it's a small sample size.
Great, thanks. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the next program then, Julia.
Great. All right, okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about ADUs. So this program is trying to alleviate, the aim is to alleviate some of the cost burden for homeowners when they're looking to develop ADUs. So the city has seen like an increase in ADU production over the past couple of years. As you guys know, we've really lifted a lot of the zoning restrictions that previously kind of stifled ADU production. So we are seeing more ADUs being built, but we're still hearing from property owners that it's very expensive. There's a lot of reasons for that. The city, we're a hillside city. Oftentimes it's just a little more complicated to build in general. Even with prefab homes with, really steep lots and hard access, it's pretty challenging. It's costly. So this program would, basically the city would commit to potentially creating a loan program for homeowners to take advantage of, perhaps it's a forgivable loan that we could fund with our affordable housing funds. It's not stated explicitly here, but we would have to have some sort of, there would probably be an affordability requirement as part of that, they get this loan, they benefit from that they then agree to rent it at lower than market rate prices for a set amount of time in order to spread that benefit around the community. So we are looking at how the city should spend affordable housing funds in the affordable housing strategic plan, which is oddly not combined with the housing element, though they are talking about, housing. So this is a program that's kind of relating back to that ongoing process. Because we're going to public hearing really soon for housing element, we wanted to put it out here in the housing element process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie for the discussion.
Do we have the questions on the next slide, Julia? Oh, on this slide. Okay. So the first question is going to be almost the same for every program, which is, what is your reaction to this program and why? And then the second question is, what else could the city do to encourage ADU construction? So again, we'll hear from commissioners first, and then we'll turn to the public.
I think we should go in reverse alphabetical order this time.
That sounds that sounds great. Or whoever wants to speak up first.
I think ADUs are a great idea, and I'm all for streamlining the process, getting rid of whatever fees or reducing it. Again, I don't have all the list requirements in front of me, but yeah, I'm all for doing whatever we can do to encourage it. But again, there's always a concern, attached with more construction of these homes, parking. so that's always a continuing concern. But yes, whatever we can do. And are we getting state funding as well for these developments of these ADUs?
No, if this program were to move forward, if council decided that they wanted to create a loan program, it would be with city funds, probably with affordable housing funds. Again, assuming that we would then have to require that it be rented at below market rate prices, but this would be city funds.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't have much to add to that. I would second that. And I understand that there would be sort of conditions attached to it, that if you get the loan to make it easier for you, then you're under an obligation to actually rent it, So I assume that she shacks and man shacks would not qualify for this program.
Thank you.
I agree with everything all the commissioners have said in terms of streamlining EDU productions, making it easier for everyday people to figure out how to do it and what the costs are associated with it. The parking is going to be an issue. And if we were to do a city loan, that would be like something we would discuss in terms of particulars, right?
Yeah, definitely this would be a carefully crafted program with council, with legal. The city has participated back when redevelopment was still around. We did do a couple like forgivable loans for rehabilitation of existing structures. So we've done it before. And our first time home buyer program initially was a kind of a similar thing. So we've had some experience doing this, but.
Any other comments from commissioners? So generally in favor, concerns about parking and the need to craft a loan program is what I've heard. How about from members of the public? Would anyone like to share their thoughts on this program about encouraging ADUs? Oh, and here's a poll.
Yeah, I've launched a poll. And if anyone wants to raise their hand and make comment, they can do so at this time.
It looks like Barbara has a comment.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Hey, so you guys know we went through this process a few years ago. And I just want to give a shout out to Julia, Randy, and the rest of the planning staff for getting us through it, because I'm sure we were absolute terrors of their days at times. And I've said this before, and I think I need to say it again. We truly appreciated and felt that every step of the process was necessary to build a safe home. There's nothing that I really think we should be doing without. And yes, it's expensive, and I don't see a way around that. I mean, you can maybe knock a few percentage points off here or there by waiving a fee, but I really don't feel that is really is going to make that much of a difference. It's such a small, anything you could do would be such a small percentage of the total cost that it doesn't make any sense to me. The thing that I really felt at the time and still feel would be the most valuable is going to punch list inspections, because inspections are nerve-wracking, and you get a different inspector in and they see different things, and that can be really give you kind of emotional whiplash. Really, it was one of the hardest parts of the process. And not that any inspector was wrong or did something wrong or was unethical or whatever, but they see different inspectors see different things, and just having a punch list and being able to go through it ahead of time and know what they're going to look at and know that two people are going to look at hopefully similar things would have just been the biggest thing, I think, for myself or a contractor or really anybody who's going through this process, is just to have a consistent kind of platform that you're working from. And then I had a goofy idea because we're doing, ADUs are there to alleviate the financial burden on homeowners. Great, I get that. I'm all for that. But, could we use some of these funds for like solar panels or insulation insulating homes or something? Because I can save you a couple $100 a month. It's probably not as big a savings as building an ADU, or it's not going to bring in as much money as an ADU would, but it also doesn't cost as much up front. So, I mean, I have a feeling that nobody's going to believe that this is the same thing, but to me it is, because if you're saving a homeowner $300 a month, then that's enough to feed people. It's enough to make a real difference.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. And I think that Julia will be presenting a program later on that gets to your last suggestion.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
So
Barbara,
stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll talk about how the city can help. It's an anti-displacement thing, right? Like helping people stay in their homes and decrease their costs of housing. So it's a point well taken. Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next program.
We are. Okay. So bear with me here. This program, I want to explain what the current program is, and I'm going to try to make it simple, although, sometimes it confuses even us planners. The city has a density transfer program that's been around for almost 20 years, I think, in the RBA, the Residential Brisbane Acres Zoning District. So what's a density transfer program? Basically, as you guys may or may not know, I have a map actually that I can show you of the RBA. So this light yellow color, it's at our southern border. That encompasses this area called the Brisbane Acres. It's contiguous with the San Bruno Mountain State and County Park. All of these lots are covered within the Habitat Conservation Plan for San Bruno Mountain, which is a federal document allowing development of lands that essentially have valuable habitat for endangered butterflies within certain limitations. So these are really sensitive lands, right? A lot of the upper parcels, they're all, for the most part, they're about half of them, maybe the city's been able to purchase and preserve in perpetuity for open space, but there are a lot of privately owned parcels in the RBA district that are still privately owned, and they're not zoned for open space, they're zoned for residential development, fairly low density at 1 unit for every 20,000 square feet of lot area. But anyway, so the city adopted the density transfer program to basically allow property owners, private property owners with vacant land, to sell the the density associated with their property to someone else in another location, with the intent that it's property owners that have potentially valuable habitat or properties that are right next to the state and county park, that they can still get some market value for their property, but transfer that development to a more appropriate property somewhere else in the acres. That's the provision of the program. It has to be somewhere else in this district, in that light colored map area. But again, the idea is it would be at another location that might be better. So this program, we haven't never approved, at least not that I could see in our records, a density transfer in all this time that it's been around. And we still have a lot of privately held parcels that have development potential and on lots that we'd like to potentially see preserved. So this program is proposing studying to expand where in the city you could transfer that development right to, that density to. Like I said, right now you can only transfer it to another property in the RBA district. This program is saying, well, could we consider allowing it to be transferred to the R2 or R3 district or the SCR01 district, which are zoning districts that have streets, that have sewer, that have infrastructure, that don't most likely do not have endangered species habitat, right? So that's the idea behind this program. I will leave it there, but happy to answer questions if there are any before we discuss.
I have a question, Julia. If you could explain further, why would someone want to buy a density from someone in the Brisbane acres? What does that get them?
Sure. So I think there's probably debate as to just like how the kind of volume of impact it would have on the receiving site, the site that's receiving that density transfer. But, as an example, say you're a lot in the R3 district, which is this dark green corridor along San Bruno. And say you have a 5,000 square foot lot that would allow, under the regulations, 2 units to be constructed. But you bought the rights, the development rights from a lot up in the RBA. Say it was a 40,000 square foot lot in the RBA. That's 2 units. So you could potentially increase the density of a lot that wouldn't otherwise be allowed under the underlying zoning regulations. So, I think it still would require a lot of machinations, and I think we'd have to study more, like, how do you really swap like single family density for multifamily? There's things to talk about and definitely study more. But that's the general idea. Did that help?
It does. And then what are the consequences of that transfer? For example, like, is the private property that is owned by that private entity then not allowed to build any buildings on their site because they've sold their zoning density rights?
That's the intended outcome. So that site, let's say up, right next to the county park that's still privately owned, because those development rights are sold, that lot would then be unable to be developed for any purpose other than just being preserved as open space.
If I might just add, I think the density transfer, actually, the sending site, if you will, goes to the city and gets put into the pool of open space. And there was actually, this was soon after the ordinance was adopted, and with our senior planner, Tim Toon, who's retired a number of years ago, there was one property as an example, and that is the development of 4 lots on San Diego Court, which is just above Humboldt. And so those lots were close into infrastructure, and they were giving up a lot that was way up high in the Brisbane acres that was far away from infrastructure. So that's just to kind of reinforce what Julia said about that. That's the benefit there, is not having to have that infrastructure.
So Ken, are you saying then that property, the owner that transfers the density, they technically no longer own the property, the city does, and then it goes into open space?
The sending site goes to open space and they get a higher density on their other property that becomes developed. So this was essentially a four site subdivision that they developed. And so the overall acreage is the same. It's 1 per 20,000, but they're giving up higher up the mountain in exchange for closer to 1 to 5,000 square foot.
So to follow up on that, so the person that buys the density, is there, let's say they're going to build more units because now they can, do so. Can their neighbors, is there like a hearing process where their neighbors can, object to that development? Because, it was a much smaller house before, and now they're going to expand it to 2, 4 units or whatever.
Well, it is subject to discretionary review. So that particular project, roughly 20 years ago, went to the Planning Commission.
It requires use permit and design permit approval, the current program, yeah. And I would anticipate that would carry through even if we expanded it to include other receiving sites.
So when the person buys the density, they have no idea, no guarantees yet that the city will approve the development, but they're taking a risk. Is that correct?
I imagine that there would, so in the case, Ken, that you were talking about, it sounds like it was the same owner. They didn't have to negotiate with another owner to buy that, right?
My understanding.
Yes. Yeah.
I would suggest that in most cases that a property transaction would be contingent upon an approval of entitlement, that you'd find very few people who are willing to buy that on a speculative basis without the approval. So the sale or the whole deal would be kind of contingent upon approval. That would be my expectation.
Great questions and clarification. So what reactions do folks have to this density transfer program?
I guess I can go first this time. I think that I would like to explore it. I think I maybe explore it with different parts of the city. And the reason why is I think that there is a large population of Brisbane residents that maybe are watching but not participating, that really are very strong believers that we have a duty to protect the environment, especially the upper acres, and as they get closer to the state park, because of the ecology, because of what happens with water, what happens with wildflowers and insects. And so I think that it'd be a very interesting and also beneficial study to partake in.
Thank you. Other reactions?
Yeah, I agree. I really like this program, and I would actually allow for, let's say someone wants to buy one of those properties in the acres. I mean, by the density. If they own multiple properties and they want to split the density, I would be open to that too. Whatever would encourage, getting as much land as we can, in the acres for open space. I think that's something that the city, a lot of the residents have voiced that desire, and I think with fire issues and whatnot, anything we can do to not develop further in that area, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I agree. I really like the program as well. It's kind of interesting. It strikes me almost as a way of taking a lot that may be essentially undevelopable, but maybe kind of a dead asset in a way, and then you're finding a way, I think a pretty creative way, to actually turn it into housing some way, I do like that part of it a lot. I do have some questions. Like you said, Julia, there's a lot of details that would have to be worked out. The first one that comes to mind for me is you had already mentioned this program earlier that we've could explore decreasing the lot size in certain parts. I guess in certain districts, I guess the premise here would be that if you transfer the density, you could potentially build even at a higher density that's being proposed there, I guess. But I'm not sure about that.
I mean, yes, if hypothetically, if both programs were pursued and we adopted similar programs, that is a potential. I think I would imagine though, we'd probably, there's, like Ken said, like there's a discretionary process in our current density transfer program. So it would require use permit and design permit approval. It wouldn't necessarily be a slam dunk by right. You can just do this. Yeah. So I think that would probably be, you know, with the Housing Accountability Act taken into consideration that says you have to apply objective standards to a housing project, you know, we'd still have the opportunity to review those applications and make sure that they aren't causing real like issues, that it's appropriate for the site development.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would have to study that for sure and make sure that we're not, there's no unintended consequences.
Yeah, so that being said, I really like it. I think it's a great idea.
Great, so we're hearing a lot of support for this, both from the perspective of allowing more housing to be built and from the perspective of providing more land for open space and environmental protection and fire prevention. Let's go to the public, see if we have any reaction from folks there, and we have another poll. Or if you have a comment, you can raise your hand.
And Commissioner Gooding, I don't know if you shared your reactions yet.
No.
You don't have to.
None, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave the poll open for another 20 seconds. Okay, so again, small sample size, but sharing the results on the screen. Neutral reaction from our participant. Okay. Okay, moving on. Oh, sorry, do we have anything? Nope, okay. Okay, moving on to this. So we did put in a new policy as a draft for increasing participation in Brisbane in housing choice vouchers, which are also known as Section 8 vouchers, and other rental assistance programs. So the background on this, compared to our neighbors in North County, we have a proportionally lower share of renter households that use these housing vouchers. These programs are distributed through the county, and they essentially help cover a certain percentage of the household's rent. These are for households that are, you know, very low income, that need help meeting market rate rents, and the government basically guarantees a certain portion of the rent and pays it directly to the landlord. So because we have a relatively lower share of folks in town, we would like to increase participation in the program. It's a voluntary program, so landlords have to opt in and kind of be friendly to it. So this program would essentially have us develop an outreach program and really try to connect with landlords in town to see that share of voucher acceptance increase.
So again, for commissioners, what is your reaction to this policy and why? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your last name. With the F?
Sorry, I was actually just reading the program out loud to myself. I didn't.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. But how do you say your last name?
Oh, Funke.
Funke, okay.
Yeah. In principle, I don't have any objection to anything like this. I think it makes sense. You know, as just to increase the awareness of it and to educate around it, and I guess it would probably include other experiences with it that are positive, and saying, look, in these other communities, a higher percentage of people do it, and landlords report no issues, great satisfaction, something like that. I'm sure that that would be sort of the, I'm guessing that would be what the outreach program would look like. And I think that would be good, because I know that affordability is a big part of the element that we're trying to encourage.
Julia, I have a question for staff as it relates to HCV vouchers. The vouchers can also be used for home ownership, right?
I'll admit I do not know the answer to that question. I'd have to look into it, but if you know more about it.
Just for some reason, I feel like there's something out there that says that HCV could be. I don't know if that's true or not. If it is, it'd be kind of interesting to study whether we could do anything for home ownership. That way you're raising, instead of just having people rent with the vouchers, they could some sort of
Like
build
a loan?
equity. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and the city did in the past have a first-time home buyer loan program. We still have homes that are covered under that program. We're just not issuing new loans at this time because it was a redevelopment thing. And that is something that the city council is going to consider as a potential use of the affordable housing funds we have, is maybe reactivating that program, maybe not. There's certain pros and cons to it in terms of how far does our money go. But yeah, that's homeownership assistance is definitely something the city could consider.
Thank you. Other questions or reactions?
Yeah, so this comes out, so the funds would come out of the city's general fund?
No, this would not be funded by, oh, sorry, to create like the campaign.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
the campaign comes, okay. But the
Yeah.
funds themselves would come from where?
Federal government. So
Okay.
yeah, the Housing Choice Voucher Rental Assistance Program, it's administered by the County Housing Authority with funds from HUD, her Housing and Urban Development Department.
Okay.
Any other reactions, comments, or questions on this one? How about from the public? None. Okay.
We do have a poll on it, but I'm not sure whether our attendees will be.
Barbara Bell raised her hand.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, great.
I missed that. Sorry. Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. I missed the comments on the previous section. Is it okay to comment on that, or would you like to just go on, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead if you can.
No, go for it.
Be brief.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just was thinking about that. I understand about getting out of the firelands. I understand nobody's more passionate about preserving open space than I am. I'm just not really excited about expanding it to other areas. We can study it, but I feel like it's gonna be a lot of nuances, a lot of potential pitfalls with that one. And I also sort of like that it kind of allows people to flaunt existing zoning, and that, somebody could do a density transfer next to me and all of a sudden there's 6 units next to me. And that's not exactly the character I wanted when I bought my home. have one other point. I'm reaching for it quickly here. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back to my point of wanting everybody to kind of a level playing field and like uniform rules. You know, it just kind of lets somebody flaunt the zoning for their lot, and I don't feel all that great about that. As much as I feel great about preserving the acres, maybe there's a better way. And I think one of the problems with the current state raft of housing programs is they implemented so many new housing programs so quickly. They really didn't think about how some of these programs interact with each other. And I think this one, as Funke, Commissioner Funke pointed out, it was on my mind too. This one has some potentially very unpleasant consequences if it gets combined with some other programs. So I'm sort of not that excited about that one, but that's all I wanted to say on that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your comment.
Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and on the housing choice voucher. And Commissioner Patel, we can provide more information on the home ownership program that you referenced for the housing choice vouchers and see if it's something that we'd want to discuss at a future shopper hearing. Okay. Okay, moving on. Here's another program that is proposing future study of a policy issue. So this particular policy issue would be rent control. Obviously, this is a hotly debated topic in the peninsula, in the Bay Area, across the country. Is rent control, does it actually achieve its aims? I think there's a lot of discussion that could be had, and I don't know that necessarily we'll discuss its merits tonight, unless we want to, but really this program is saying that we're committing to studying it in detail at a future time, not committing us to a particular course of action. So that's all the setup. I'll give that.
Reaction from commissioners to this idea of studying rent control. Any thoughts?
I think it's very hard to say no to studying something. I must admit, I don't know enough about the pros and cons of this and whether it actually is effective or not, and to what end. So just as an opportunity to learn more about that, I'm in favor of it.
So my take on rent control is that it's such a hot button item for many communities. And part of the problem is that once you start talking about it, you really are pitting different communities, one against the other, in terms of which one is a better deal, which one has more rent control, which one's less. And I think doing these things locally is perhaps a mistake. And I think rent control is a thing that needs to be, in my opinion, more globally is the wrong word, but more statewide or at least region-wide, so that we don't have one community pitted against the other on a market, competition sense. I think if we're going to have rent control to be able to have people live affordably in our state or our county or our region, it needs to be region-wide or county-wide. So that's my take.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? All right, any thoughts from the public? Have another poll.
Barbara Bell has her hand raised. I don't know if it's left over from the previous question.
Barbara, would you like to comment, or is it your hand raised from before? Maybe she stepped away.
I was just saying I forgot it from before. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna close that poll, and it's such a hot button topic that our participants declined to participate. So no results for that one.
All right, well, that was a short discussion then.
Yeah, surprising.
Okay, so next program. Okay, so this is the program we had teased earlier. It's kind of another funding related program, but it's meant to help offset the cost of homeownership by reducing your utility costs, heating and etc. By funding some upgrades for appliances and that sort of thing. So the city kind of putting a little more money to where our climate goals are and our housing affordability goals are.
May I ask a question for clarification? Is this are you saying that this would propose the city provide funds to decrease the utility costs of individual homeowners or renters?
Yeah, it would be dedicating costs to, say, purchase for installation or offset the rebate, excuse me. What's listed here is, low flow or other like toilets. We already have, for example, a efficient toilet replacement program that's I think 200. So like increasing it to 500 or 1,000 or whatever. That sort of program. We wouldn't be actually like paying homeowners without anything.
Okay.
So reactions to this program or other ideas to increase water and energy efficiency in homes in order to reduce costs?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. Anything that concerns water and energy, and as long as we have the funding for it, I would encourage it.
Do I have a process question perhaps, or I'm not sure what kind of question it is, but why is this a city burden, city by city, as opposed to a statewide reimbursement or statewide subsidization program?
Mhm.
Given that water is a statewide problem, and in fact, you can argue that there are many other counties that are more profligate in their use of water than we are.
I think your point's well taken, that it could always be, these are all serving larger statewide goals, whether it be water conservation or maintaining affordability for keeping people in their homes. But the fact of the matter is there are no state programs ongoing for these kind of activities. So that would be why it would be city funded and initiated through this concept.
Yeah, I thought that was a great question, Commissioner Gooding, thinking about it. But then thinking back, I guess it is one of the stated goals of the housing element, right? You have the greenhouse gas reduction thing. So it definitely fits under the scope of the plan, even though my first reaction might be, what does this necessarily do to address housing, either equity or housing supply? But it's in the housing element. So I think it does fit. And I guess the question would just be, I think it's very easy to say that these are all these ideas sound great. As long as there's money for them, I guess. But maybe that's not, I guess the discussion tonight is just, in principle, does each idea by itself sound like a good idea? And I would also say yes to this one.
Any other comments or reactions? All right, anything from the public? And I think we have another poll.
And I will say, to your point, Commissioner Gooding, there are regional programs like Bay Ren, which is referenced on the slide, the County of San Mateo, their sustainability department also has like rebate programs that you'll see throughout the year being advertised. So I think definitely the city wouldn't expect, or staff isn't envisioning that we're going to totally like fund every household in Brisbane to, you know, the scope would still be pretty small. It's more just like it is a patchwork of programs right now. So should we increase our little patch of the overall patchwork quilt in the absence of state funding?
Right. Well, I recognize. I take your point. These are all, you know, we're trying to struggle with whose burden it should be and can be and can be afforded to be. You know, my being my bonnet about all these things is that the state pushes these things downhill and we try to push them back uphill, and you know, where does it wind up, you know, sitting at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And you know, this right along with water and right along with housing itself is, to me, my particular you know, being the bonnet, is that we can't solve these things on a micro basis. We have to solve them on a macro basis. So and end of diatribe.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll, and we did not have any responses, so we can move on. Okay. So we had talked about parking earlier. Here is a program to study and consider whether we should amend our parking requirements to allow reductions in the required parking in exchange for whether it be stuff like a prepaid transit fare, rideshare apps like Uber or Lyft, prepaid credits for residents of this new development, basically, or zip car memberships, something that the developer is going to commit to financially, that would make it really easy, or a lot easier, for their residents to not have a car and justify a reduction in parking, considering that, you know, our transit usage is not necessarily on its own like super high quality and likely to get a lot of people out of their cars, at least until we have a new Caltrain station. So again, this is another study at a future time, but we wanted to see what you guys thought about this as a concept in general.
Do we still have the zip car program? Is that still, I know we had a ribbon cutting for it. I've never used it, but are they still there?
There was one at the Park and Ride. I don't know that it's there anymore. We would have to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Perhaps Barbara knows. She's raised her hand. I don't know if she has a comment, or we could follow up on that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually, it's not so much like a unfunded mandate that's being pushed downhill, right? This is on the developer. Yeah, I think it's one thing potentially to consider. I think there's other, I guess there's sticks and carrots, right? These are sort of carrots. I think sticks would be, I'm sure that's, I think there's another commission studying this, right? Sticks might be, you know, if you have a car on the street, you got to pay something like that, or you have more than one car. I think some combination of that and these kinds of programs, I think, could be good. I think it's a separate discussion, but I can't believe that Brisbane is the only community that is dealing with too many cars. So I assume there's other solutions that are out there for us to take advantage of as well.
Thank you. Other reactions from commissioners to this program?
Yeah, I see no harm in you know, studying the issue, because the more we look at it, the better. I have no answers to the problem at this point, but I think the more we look at it, the better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's worth studying. But you know, some of the things that's listed here, like a prepaid transit fare card and whatnot. I mean, it would have to be tied to the resident, because what if, you know, they give it to someone else who doesn't live here to use, you know, so the developer would really have to find a way to make sure that only the person that lives here can use, you know, those modes of transportation, so that they'll have to use it.
Yeah, so there's some details and maybe some enforcement involved there. Yeah. Any other reactions from commissioners before we go to the public? Okay, oh, Barbara had her hand raised, but it looks like she put it down. Did you have a comment, Barbara? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
I was just gonna say the parking lot, they left because they weren't getting, Zipcar left because they weren't getting enough business. Yeah, and I did respond to energy efficiency measures, that poll, but I guess you said you didn't get any responses, so for some reason it didn't register, because I like it.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but thank you.
Ah.
It says 0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So any other comments or questions on this program around reducing parking and encouraging alternative modes of transportation? Okay.
Okay, well, we made it through. Obviously, those are the programs that staff had highlighted for tonight. I will open it up if, you know, it's 9 o'clock, so perhaps you guys are ready to end the evening, but this would be a good time if you guys had any other questions on other draft policies and programs. We are here to discuss them, but this was really intended to be a kind of sneak preview. We will have, as our next step slide says right here, we are going to have another workshop, and I'm assuming more than one public hearing on the housing element. So a lot more opportunity for public engagement and comment, as well as the commissioners.
So I have one, it's not a solution, it's not an answer to anything. It's just highlighting an issue, which is that Commissioner Patel and many of us over the years have talked about parking as you know, a real thorn in the side of a lot of issues. So issues about permits, issues about building, issues about all kinds of stuff. And the very last slide, the very last point was about transit stuff. And obviously those are inextricably intertwined. The reason we have parking crises is because we don't have great transit, because as a city, we have this weird setup where we have, you know, one little thoroughfare and a bunch of little tiny streets off on the side that aren't amenable to transit. So I think this is one of the real issues that the city needs to struggle with, is how to figure out transit versus parking as a real systemic challenge for every single growth issue that we have. No answers, just posing the question.
Yeah. I don't have any answers either right now.
I mean, you know, for example, I look at this program 6A5 and it shows rideshare app credits. The last time we went for a trip last month, it cost us $50 to get from here to SFO.
With a rideshare.
With Uber, yeah. No developer is going to absorb those kinds of costs. Well, unlikely they would. It's a real difficult issue.
Thank you. Yeah, we had, there was a project, if you guys remember, 213 Visitation, that little yellow house. that you all approved a design permit for a 4-unit mixed use redevelopment, and the property owner had thrown out there, like, as you recall, they had to get a use permit approved to have 4 spaces on site where 5 were required. And this was something the property owner had kind of thrown out, like, well, you know, I'll do these things to, you know, not only are we demonstrating that we can make it work with 4 spaces, but we're going to go above and beyond and kind of do these extra incentives. So from the property owner's perspective, their market research, you know, for a 4-unit structure at least showed that they think it could have helped them attract folks. But, you know, it's a very niche kind of scale of developer. And yeah, I hear you. If one ride costs $50, yeah. So lots of things to think about. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, next steps. Hopefully we'll see the housing element released next. We're looking at next week. As soon as it is published as a draft, it's going to start the clock for our public comment period. The state says we have to have at least 30 days for public review, and we have to take that review into consideration. We're going to have well in excess of that. So before it goes to the city council. Ken, anything to add here beyond what's on the slide?
No, nothing. I appreciate the comments from all the commissioners and the public, and we're looking forward to getting the housing element out to you all for further review and comment.
Okay, stop sharing. That concludes our workshop, and I want to just thank Debbie and for facilitating, and Saini for taking notes. We'll have a summary report of the workshop. Well, obviously you'll have your minutes, but we'll also have a little summary for the housing element itself. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Julia, for taking the lead on this, or at least presenting.
Oh, Ken, don't worry. Ken and Jeremiah had plenty of skin in this game. Yeah.
All right. I guess the next item is items initiated by staff.
I don't know the last time we met, so I don't know what the council's done. I think a couple things noteworthy. We did have a scoping meeting for the quarry EIR. So I don't know if anybody's interested in that. That information, the scoping presentation and comments on the NOP, notice preparation of the EIR are available on the city's website under the quarry project page. So that's one thing. And then there was an appeal by Google Bus of the revocation of the use permit, and council heard it once in July and then continued it, the hearing into September. So I took no final action yet. They're going to have a hearing in September. I think those are the 2 items. Julia or Ken, if I'm missing anything of great consequence, go ahead and fill it in.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we said the grading, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for informing us about those items. And then, are there any items initiated by the commission? I have none.
I have none. I have a question. Is the quarry, is that a question are any parts of that going to come in front of the planning commission, or is that?
So it'll all come before the planning commission, the EIR, and then the actual discretionary permit, which is to create a zoning district to allow for certain forms of development, because that property isn't within the city, so it's not within any current existing zoned district. So get annexed and create a zoning district. So they don't have a development project, a literal building at this point in time that's on the table. So it'll be development standards and an EIR.
I just want to say on the grading issue, having had several grading permits come up to the commission during my tenure. I am grateful and thankful to the council for finally achieving a little bit more clarity on the scope of the commission's jurisdiction about grading permits. So we have a little bit more guidance and a little bit more clarity on how to go in the future.
We're all glad for that.
Yeah.
I assume, you know, I noticed we got the memo. I'm afraid I haven't seen the you know, the language itself, but I'm sure that's available on the page, city page.
Yeah, there's a link to the ordinance. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's you know, a little bit legalese, but it's definitely a little bit more specific and more clear about what our purview is, which is nice.
Expands your purview also pretty significantly.
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah, in a sort of a backwards way. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks everyone. If there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to adjourn the meeting to our next regularly scheduled meeting of August 11th, 2022.
All right.
Wonderful. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.